Welcome. Thank you for joining us for our program, Working with Your Landscaper to Enhance Sustainability on Your Property. My name is Helen Liu, and I'm the Programming and Partnerships Manager at Cary Library. I'd like to thank Andy Joint and Lexington Living Landscapes for their partnership on today's event. This program is being recorded and will be posted to the library's YouTube channel. If you have any questions, please submit them to the Q&A, and our speaker will answer them at the end of the program. I'm going to pass the mic to Andy, who would like to say a few words about Lexington Living Landscapes and introduce our guest this evening.
Thanks, Helen. Good evening and welcome. We're delighted to have you with us. I'm Andy Joint with Lexington Living Landscapes. Before I turn the floor over to Marie, let me say a word about Lexington Living Landscapes for any of you not familiar with us. We are a local volunteer nonprofit initiative launched in 2020 to promote more sustainable landscaping practices in town. More native plants, fewer invasives, fewer chemicals, more trees. We grew out of a collaboration between the town's Sustainable Lexington Committee and three local nonprofits, the Lexington Field and Garden Club, Lexington Climate Action Network, and Citizens for Lexington Conservation. You can learn more about us, including how to sign up for our newsletter, at our website, lexingtonlivinglandscapes.org. Our great thanks to Marie for joining us this evening and sharing her wisdom with us. And thank you, as always, to Helen and our friends at Cary Library for hosting this evening's program. After Marie's presentation, we'll have a Q&A session moderated by me. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A widget, not the chat widget. We'll get to as many of them as I can. I'll be monitoring that Q&A for questions, so please put them there. Finally, before introducing our speaker, let me mention two more programs that Lexington Living Landscapes has coming up this spring. On April 9th, in collaboration with the Lexington Field and Garden Club, landscape designer Trevor Smith will present a program titled Stormwater Management for Homeowners. This program will again be hosted by Cary Library, so please mark your calendars, register at the Cary Library website, and join us. I'd also like to mention that beginning today, our 6th annual native plant sale is live and open for orders. In collaboration with the Lexington Conservation Office, we are once again offering a variety of native species. They are packaged as sun kits, shade kits. We have 5 a la carte species. And new this year, we're offering two plugs of 2 species that are often used as lawn replacements. Plants must be pre-ordered through the Lexington Recreation Department's website and will be available for pickup on May 9th. You can find all of this information, descriptions of the plants, and more on our website. And in just a moment, I will be dropping a link to the native plant sale website in the chat window. So you can look for it there, and we will follow up with the link via email. Now, please allow me to introduce our speaker, and then I'll get out of the way. First, a quote. In his writings on the wild, Thoreau noted that, quote, gardening is civil and social, but it wants the vigor and freedom of the forest, unquote. I often feel this tension myself in my own gardening, which is why I'm so grateful to have Marie Chieppo joining us this evening. Marie is a true leader in regenerative design and sustainable landscapes. She shares her expertise as an instructor for the Native Plant Trust and the Conway School of Landscape Design, and serves on the board of the Ecological Landscape Alliance. A published author on healthy landscapes, she is also partnering with Trevor Smith to lead expert projects from Greater Boston to the Cape. Marie is here to help us navigate how to collaborate with our landscapers to achieve our eco-friendly goals. And Marie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm sure everybody's been outside, hopefully not digging in your soil because it's a bit wet, but enjoying the sunshine. What a long winter, but I'm just grateful you're here. And we're going to talk about ways that we can have more sustainability on our properties. And my button is a little too happy here. Okay, so why your landscape matters. I mean, I'm sure you have all heard about, Doug Tallamy's corridor work and the importance of having connectivity in the wilds, in landscapes and wildlife. And by and large, every component on our property impacts each other. So the landscapes that we have also impact the ecosystem and the health of your neighbor's landscapes. So everything, as Doug Tallamy would say, is interconnected. It is, because we're talking about systems that are in place that nature put there to help us have sustainable landscapes. So an ecosystem is a living system. An ecosystem is all living things that are together, that depend on one another for functioning. Soil is a living thing. Roots are living things. Water is living. Plants are living, and of course, wildlife is living. And so each of these elements is a system within itself, but it's also a system, a part of the entire ecosystem. So looking at properties just as a plant that's out there is fine, but it doesn't tell the holistic story of what is happening on your property. And I think one of the issues that come up for a lot of us is we look at our properties and our gardens as individual beings, not as a dynamic system that works together and together creates health, or things suffer, what have you. But everything on your property is interrelated. And that's how we treat it ecologically. I could make this talk very short and tell you that these three components in front of you are all you need to have a healthy landscape, but that's not going to help you. Soil, of course, is vital to the health of each and every plant that we have in our landscapes. Water, of course, is incredibly important to sustaining that life. And the plants, of course, also have an important role in maintaining the health on our properties, as well as this little guy who's sitting on the top of the flower. So again, it's all interrelated, but these are three large components that we struggle with because we don't pay enough attention to it. So if you think of soil, not just soil that is something you see when you dig a hole to put in a plant, but rather an organic being. So our soils will hold, for every 1% of organic matter, 20 to 25,000 gallons of water per acre. So if you think about having soil that is going to be able to infiltrate that water, soil that is not compacted, right? But soil that's able to infiltrate that water, immediately we're providing that water and those nutrients to our plants. We're offsetting erosion issues. And with the extreme weather that we have now, the more frequent extreme weather, it's more important than ever that we have actual living soil on our properties and not just, as a friend of mine says, dirt. There's a huge difference between soil and dirt. Dirt does not have any aerobic activity going on inside of it. It doesn't have any microorganisms. It's just minerals. It's just, what you see. And I wanted to share with you, because again, this is the basis of a healthy landscape, what goes on in that soil? What am I talking about when I'm discussing living things? So in the soil, when you have healthy soil, the organic matter is there for protozoa, bacteria, fungi, etc., to work with and depend on and to consume. So our plants can't consume on their own. They can't consume, the nutrients in the water that they need. They need things in the soil that take that water and those nutrients and feed it to the roots, and it takes it back up to the plant. So the photo that you see here on the bottom with the crazy looking stars, things happening, that's hyphae of fungi So hyphae is, it sits on the fungi, and what you see in the upper right corner is an example of a plant that has fungi in the soil that is making these nutrients in the water more available to this plant. Thus, the plant is expanding itself better than it would if that fungi was not in there. It's going deeper, it's going laterally. So you see all those spores up there. That's what is keeping that system going. So when I speak of living soil, this is what I'm talking about. When we have properties that are treated with chemicals, none of this exists because it kills the ability of this life to exist in the soil. So you're basically then, of course, having to feed your soil like crazy and feed your plants like crazy because this living material is not in there. The roots of many of our native plants are thus so that they go down deeply. Again, they go out laterally. We also have roots that just go straight down to the base of the soil, and so thus we have plants that are able to aerate that soil. They're able to get those nutrients. They're able to absorb that water, and they increase the holding capacity in the soil by working their way through the soil and improving the structure of the soil. So all of this works in tandem. So having a healthy property means having healthy soil, having good water absorption, not too much, having plants that have roots that can expand down into the soil strata, and of course the wildlife that depends on everything. So the water piece is, of course, a huge component. However, we have properties where water loss happens a lot. I look at this property in particular, which I visited last year, and the first thing I thought of was whatever they water this grass with isn't staying there because the lawn, the soil is compacted. It was treated, and you look at this surface, which is just an invitation for water to immediately run off of and go down into the body of water. So when we want to create a more sustainable, ecologically healthy property, we need to think about all of these things. We need to put all of these components together. And what we know, and of course many of you know, is that a traditional lawn uses up a substantial lot more of water than a water-wise landscape does, or a lawn that is alternative or has been turned into a garden or something like that. So this is not new information to you, but I just want you to see the components that go into thinking about what is ecological, what is healthy. And of course, the foundation of the food web, which includes the native plants, the insects, the birds, all of this, again, ecosystem, working together, living together, whether it's a symbiotic relationship or a mutualistic relationship, all of this depends on one another. And of course, none of this would exist if it weren't for, well, you would have weeds if you didn't have healthy soil. You would have different kinds of weeds that you really don't want. But because nature is always going to fill a void. Nature has a way of caring for itself that way, of just always filling a void. It doesn't like to have empty surface. It fills it with something because it knows what it's doing much better than we do. And again, I just wanted to show you, so sorry, I apologize, the same statistic, but the amount of water that we're using inside our homes and the amount of water that we're using outside. So it's substantial. So there are other ways of doing things. So you're here to learn about how can we take this information and share it with our landscapers and start to make a difference. And another more data that didn't need to be in there. 9 billion gallons used daily for landscape irrigation, 50% wasted. So this is actually something I wanted to bring up with you. The amount of water that is transpired from the water that comes out of the irrigation is phenomenal. So a fair amount of water is lost right there as soon as before it even hits the ground or even before it gets to the plant. So landscapers are our partners on our properties, or they can be our partners. I had business where I had a crew and we went to properties. We did the A to Z, design to maintain. So I know what's involved in working with families, working with landowners in terms of, maintaining their property. The difference is with ecological work, it's not just maintain, it's manage. So one of the reasons I came up with this topic was years ago in working with homeowners and working on their landscapes and creating designs for them, the concern of there not being any landscapers that knew how to care for these properties afterwards. They had people coming in and taking plants down, cutting grasses, cutting things down to the base of the plant or the base of the grass, you name it, pruning, shearing, and so forth. So I get that. I understand that. And I think in order for them to be partners with us, it's important that we be educated. And as a result, they will also have reason to be educated. There definitely is a push-pull, but I think as we increase the demand for alternative types of services, the availability is the demand will be met. So sustainable landscaping is a thing. It truly is a thing. When I first moved down here 5 years ago, there were 2 other ecological landscape designers. Now there are about 15. So globally, landscaping services on an eco-friendly front is good business. And as you probably already know, sustainability is good business. It's an issue of how do you go about doing that? Clients do prefer eco-friendly landscaping approaches, and 60%, sustainability is an issue that they think about in regards to their lawns. So issues that oftentimes come up are things such as I would like some native plants. I would like to reduce the chemicals or completely do away with the chemicals on my property. Stormwater, things are eroding and so forth. So the demands for all of these services is exponentially increasing. And I wanted to break this down for you to give you a better sense of what the difference is between conventional versus ecological on a number of different tasks. So for example, if you have a landscaper who's coming in and they're mowing every week, every 2 weeks, they're mowing it down, to an inch and a half. That's a task that is related to that type of plant on a property. In ecological landscapes, and I'm not going to go into design today, but there are ways that we can work around that. There are ways of increasing the height at which you mow and decreasing the frequency at which you mow to have a healthier property. Irrigation, of course, in ecological work, we're putting the right plants in the right place, but also these plants, as I showed you, have this connection with the living with the living soil. And so the plants tend to be more resilient. They tend to be able to withstand harsh conditions much better than our typical plants can. Fertilization is not used. I would say that organic fertilizers can certainly be used, but the whole idea is we're looking for health through that soil. So we're not focusing on feeding that soil anything, but rather letting nature take care of it. And I don't want to be extreme here in what I'm suggesting. There are things in the middle, of course, but I just wanted to show this to you to give you a sense of how this service, if you will, can be different over time. And trying to break the traditional cycle of the mow, the blow, the treating, the lawn. So if you think of it the way I listed it here, we're not viewing this property as a system. We're viewing this property as a problem, and there's a problem here, there's a problem here, and we need this problem fixed, which whatever it takes to fix it, whether it's a chemical or not, fertilizers, we're going to fix this. We're going to, put more granular something down, and it's going to, help the whole thing. Well, probably the bigger issue is there's a soil issue, or there's, a virus or something that's happening in the lawn to compromise the lawn and to create that situation. So again, we're looking at things as individuals, not as a holistic system. So Trevor and I, we test every property that we work on, we test the soil. And we want to know what's going on in that soil so that we can plant properly, so we can put the right plants in that right place. So that is absolutely important. But also, again, we're looking at the entire system, right? We're looking at integrating pest management. We're working in a way that we're trying to prevent problems from happening in the first place. So, and in doing this, we're reducing the inputs. We're creating this healthy soil. And so this is something that, as I have discussed with other landscapers, is a service that can certainly be provided, and there's certainly a demand for it. So if we look at spring, in a traditional service, if you will, so the landscape schedule consists of mowing, feeding, blowing things out that they don't want anymore. So it's largely based on aesthetics. It's not so much based on health. But what I oftentimes say to people is I've never seen an unhealthy plant that was pretty. So we do need to think about the health on our landscapes. Nature, on the other hand, does things in its own on its own speed, on its own timer, if you will. But also the way we respond to it can be different. So not taking all of the leaves out, perhaps leaving some of the leaves, at the back of the garden. Pruning, not letting things get sheared with one of the electric shears. Again, it depends on the plant that you're talking about. If you have a huge hedge and it would take years for somebody to go and hand prune it, I get that. But there are also healthier ways of doing that as well. So we're looking at the property as these living beings, and we want to take care of these living beings. So it should require less fertilizer. It should require less water. It should require fewer replacements, because the whole idea is the plants are healthy. And a property that has a healthy ecosystem requires a lot less maintenance than one that requires a lot of maintenance, because nature truly is doing that work for you. So to give you an example, since I moved down here, when I first moved here and I acquired this property, it had been traditionally taken care of. I did nothing. I didn't add anything in terms of chemicals or what have you. The lawn did, after a while, look not so great, but I knew that I didn't want a perfectly green lawn. But I did have diseases here and there. I had, skeletonizing happening on some plants. I had, branching or flowering that wasn't happening, that should have happened. And basically, since then, I have none of these issues anymore, because nature, and I know this sounds like too happy or too positive, but it really works. Nature does take care of it for you. So you get those beneficial insects in there. They're going to help you keep that property healthy. They're going to eat the bad bugs. So there are other ways of doing this. So I'm just trying to show you that this is something that you can obtain. It's something that when you speak to landscapers over time, you can obtain. I just want you to know that we can do better by our landscapes, and we can work with our landscapers in a way that we're all working together. So one thing that occurs to me often is you don't need, a new crew. You need to be asking new requests. You need to be thinking differently about what it is that you're asking them to do. And only then can we teach or sort of make them curious, right? That there's a different way of doing something. And I know this is a lot. I'm sending this to you, so don't feel you have to memorize this. But 10 signs that your landscaper thinks ecologically, goodness gracious. So they do talk about the soil. They don't just talk about chemicals that they're putting on the soil. They talk about how they can make the soil more healthy. They're talking about the goal of reducing inputs, meaning water and fertilizer and so forth on your property. They are looking to, make sure that the irrigation is working properly. It's not just watering everything all the time. It's specific to the plants that actually need it. And of course, matching plants to site conditions is critical. No plant is going to be healthy or beautiful if it's not happy where it is. So these are just things that if you're speaking to somebody and they start mentioning this kind of work that they do or their processes, it gives you a sense that, okay, they have an idea of what I'm looking for. So again, landscapers that I have spoken to, they do want to provide better services. Granted, they're not all steaming, fast forward ahead saying, I don't want to mow lawns anymore. I don't want to, be pruning anymore. And that's not what I'm even suggesting in any way. But there's a way that they can divest their services so that it can meet some of your goals and ultimately meet all of your goals. So the good news is there are more landscapers that are working towards this type of work as opposed to just the mow and blow. And I think towns like Lexington are setting good examples for what consumers are really looking for on their properties. So the ears are open. It's a matter of how can we be creating that demand for them to convince them, right, that this is something that we want and that what we're looking for. So what should we be asking? What should we be saying to them or asking, whether it's somebody who's been with you for a long time or it's somebody that you're just interviewing? I think the message for both basically is, how can we do better, right? How can we do better on our landscapes so that things are healthier overall? So starting with better questions, one question being, how will this landscape perform over time? So in asking that question to yourself, right, and of course to them, you are immediately setting up this holistic way of thinking. It's not my bush over here didn't flower last year. The grass over here, was brown. I mean, all of these things are valid. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you're trying to set up the conversation, if you will, with them and others about the overall health of your property. And of course, it involves aesthetics. And of course, it involves health. And of course, it involves function. And when I say function, I just don't mean for wildlife, but, is it functioning to your expectations? Is it blooming? Is it, is it growing? Things along those lines. So I put in a couple of brief case studies. Last year, I had gone to some households because the homeowners didn't know how to have these conversations with their landscapers. So one example was this person who said, I don't want to use chemicals anymore. And I met with them. I walked the property. And the ideas that popped into my brain basically were, okay, well, one way to reduce is to expand the garden beds, right? So you have less lawn to think about. The other is to, in time, stop the chemicals and start thinking about enhancing the soil health. So, and of course, in terms of the detail work, not working on it when it's wet, making sure it's aerated, and adding a thin layer of compost to the lawn to start that whole system of, it's like a respirator to get it thinking, get it breathing, get those nutrients in there. And of course, I then met with their landscaper. I walked the property with them. We didn't just talk about lawn, but we talked about the overall health of things. And they were excited that there was the opportunity to expand the garden, to make it larger, to put in more plants. I do always emphasize to put in plants. I try to put in, emphasize native plants, but that comes from you, right? So another thing is, if you have a list of plants and you've done your research and you know where it will do well, this is something that you should talk about with your landscaper, talk about, quantities and so forth, so that you're getting the plants on there that you want. The second case study involved something we're all very familiar with, which was fall cleanup. And this was actually a property I had done some work on. And the homeowner was concerned about what happens every fall. So this is a household that is used in the summer only. They're not there all year. And we find this a lot in the Cape, that people sort of rely on their landscapers to come and do the right thing, and so forth. But she was concerned. So I offered to meet with the landscaper. And we walked through and we found ways to find a happy medium, right? So not demanding, not saying I'm right, this is what I want, but saying I would really appreciate having some of these leaves left in the garden space. And one suggestion being putting them towards the back of the garden if it's an aesthetic issue for the homeowner, or perhaps doing it just in the back of the property. It doesn't necessarily have to only happen in the front of the property, or both. Not cutting down every single stem, thinking about wildlife over the winter and habitat, but cutting the stems, in some areas, right? So sort of compromising, and it's not a bad idea if you're first starting off with the landscaper to start in areas, because if you yourself are not sure of what you want to do and how things are going to turn out, it's great to sort of modify that a little bit and say, let's try this area this year. Let's see, perhaps we're not going to add any fertilizer over here. We're not going to add any chemicals to the lawn over here. Let's just see what happens. And so it takes the pressure off of them to do things perfectly, but at the same time, it's giving them, the regular work that they have. So negotiation and collaboration are key. So again, not looking to dictate, but to collaborate. Start with sections, which is what I just suggested to you. Be prepared with what you want. So try to do your research. If you look at areas and you say, okay, I can't stand the way they've been dealing with this, well, have an idea of what you're looking for. You may not necessarily know how they're going to go about doing that, but if you say, I want a more natural aesthetic, I don't want everything buzzed back like crazy, and so forth. Have a budget in mind of what perhaps you think you can pay for them to change up their services in a certain area. Maybe you'll save money. It's very possible. It depends on the landscaper themselves. But also, and I am put in this position a lot. People ask for a hard figure to do work. Don't expect that of the landscaper. They need to sort of absorb, recalculate, think about what it is that they can do for you and what their costs are going to be. So again, just keeping that, collaborative, positive approach works for everybody. So what is the soil like here? These are just things that popped into my head. Where does the water go when it rains? So a lot of landscapers don't think about that. They're just thinking about what's happening in your garden. Are the plants getting watered enough? But if you're worried about, things eroding off your landscape and going down storm drains and things like that, this is a worthy conversation to have. Why are my plants being skeletonized? Well, chances are the plant is not in a good space, but and is unhealthy. But these are questions that are important for you to ask, because each of these questions has something to do with the system that I'm talking about. So the soil in that space is going to sort of tell you, right, what's going to work there, what's not going to work there. Is there, are you losing a lot of water off of your property, or is it collecting somewhere? So the water and the plants, meaning the plants are not healthy. And so the whole system is interrelated. For example, ask your landscaper about the soil. So instead of just the typical, we're gonna come this year, we're gonna do what we do, you can ask them, perhaps we can test the soil before we add anything this year, so you get a better sense of what plants belong there. And perhaps instead of fertilizing, we can put some compost down. So we're not taking work away from them. We're changing the services to what they're providing us. And again, perhaps not all at once, but in increments. Mulch, huge issue. The best things you can do is to ask them to remove the old piles that haven't broken down, because what happens is a lot of landscapers come back every year, they just add more mulch, and before you know it, you have 2 feet of mulch that don't allow the water or the nutrients to penetrate down into the soil, and your plants die. So again, thinking about how much mulch are they putting down? Is it an appropriate amount? And I have created questions and topics for you that I sent off to Lexington. So they're going to be sharing those with you after this evening. So I don't want you to think you're having to, memorize all of this. I'm trying to give you a general idea of what to look for. And irrigation is a huge issue, as I already mentioned. So you're sort of putting the message in their head of, I'm looking to do things a little bit differently than the guy next door. So are there areas we can reduce irrigation? I don't need all of this. What's going to happen if I don't irrigate that? If they say to you, I don't know, well, that's not a good answer. I mean, you need to have somebody who can at least give you a sense of plants and what happens to that plant when it doesn't get watered. Perhaps convert the lawn to garden beds and shrubs, right? As an answer for being concerned about mowing, irrigating the entire lawn. The goal being to lower the amount of water that you're using, to have healthier plants, and to avoid having fungal issues. So these are all things, all questions that, again, plant that seed in the head of, okay, they're looking for something a bit different from us. Assess other options for the lawn, of course, alternative lawns, or again, creating garden beds. I already mentioned mowing less frequently and higher. What happens is, if you're mowing down to the nub, that grass leaf needs photosynthesis, and you're basically denying it photosynthesis if you are taking it down so far, because then it has nothing to feed the roots. The roots are about that big. So if you're a little root system about that big, you're going to have issues if you're not getting the photosynthesis, you're not getting the food. And of course, compaction issues. So compaction issues is something you should discuss with your landscaper, because a lot of problems oftentimes are due to compaction and we don't even realize it. And I'm not just talking about lawns, but throughout our properties. Excuse me, I need some water. Ways that we can keep things on site, not in an ugly way, in an ecologically healthy way, but for the reasons that I've stated here and that I've been stating. I mean, basically, and as I wrote here, we're paying to remove fertility on our properties when we let them take absolutely everything off. things can stay. So for example, in my garden, I leave a layer of leaves, and once the temperatures are 50 degrees consistently for 5 days or so, then I will rake them off. Not all of them, but I will rake them off, and I'll put them, by my trees or something like that. Not everybody has that option. I realize that. But again, doing things in moderation, but without the thinking that, oh my God, there's a leaf on my property, this is bad. I need to remove it. And I already mentioned this about the soil test and the fertilizer. Asking them, how can we leave some leaves on the property next fall? Let them come up with the idea. See what they have to say. Some people may have great ideas for what you can do. I mean, you can certainly get one of those mulching machines and, break up the leaves yourself, or maybe that's a service that they can provide to you. These are all opportunities for landscapers. We're not looking to take work away from them. So in 3 different categories: soil health services, so they can be doing soil testing for us. They can be providing compost. So these are just examples of work that we can be asking them to do for us. It's when we are passive and we don't ask anything that we're going to get typical. And that's just the name of the game, unless you have a landscaper that you love and does the kind of work that you like. So getting there is multiple ways of how we can get there. So you could say to your landscaper, I would just like a little native garden over here this year. So anything along those lines, regardless of the size, is making a difference. And I think one area where people get overwhelmed is this notion that, oh my gosh, I'm not doing all of these things. I'm not going to do anything. If I can't do all these things, I'm not going to do anything. Or I'm not doing it well enough. So the judgment gets in there, and all the more reason to speak to amongst yourselves, because you're all, I would think, on the same page. But come up with ideas for what you can do on your properties to enhance the sustainability of it. And there's so many options that's similar to like what you see here for approaches that we can be making. Even if it's to put in a shrub at the base of your driveway that has a grade to it to hold the water back. It doesn't have to be anything significant. And this is all work that landscapers are happy to provide for us. So having an audit does help. So walking through a property with people, meaning me or others, does help. So sort of getting that initial expert eye to suggest areas where things could be improved and how you can get there. So not necessarily always having to, or just solely relying on your landscaper to come up with these ideas. Again, native plants are making their way. There still exists the mindset that native plants are messy, or they don't work well, they don't flower, they're not pretty. So those conversations are starting to change. And landscapers at conferences, I speak at them, and Trevor and others speak at them, are hearing this message more and more than ever before. So they are interested in wanting to meet the interest and the demand of you folks. But sometimes they just don't know how to get there. So, when we start asking, landscape companies will start adapting, and they will see that this is a source of diversifying revenue. Does there need to be education? Yes. Does there need to be interest and involvement, or the company feeling this is worthwhile? Is this a worthwhile, twist for us to take as opposed to what we typically do? Time is going to tell that. But one of the reasons I'm thrilled to be here tonight is to show you how we can get there, and also that we can increase this demand. We can start to make a change, because demand is what brings that change. So try to be informed. So this is an example, this photo here. This is a stylistic way of working with native plants. So these are grasses. This is, I'm trying to remember right now, prairie dropseed. So what they did to make it a little more stylistic is in the summer, they cut, they cut them way down so they almost look like they're fanned out. They're going to grow over the course of the season, and in the fall, the seed heads will be there. So, there are ways of having things look a little bit more upscale, if you will, with our plants and sort of, dropping that notion that native plants are messy. It all comes down to an issue of right plant, right place. Um, Asking for help assessing your yard, taking classes, getting a sense of what does it really mean to be green and how can I get there? One program I can tell you that is amazing was Connecticut's accredited organic land care program. Even if you're not a professional, taking that course, it gives you an insight to how ecology works, to how your landscape works, to how you can have alternative lawn or how you can just have an organic lawn. Just treating it not with chemicals, but aerating it and providing it with compost and so forth. So you yourself being informed is huge. As I said, landscapers are going to be picking up on this, that this is what we're looking for, but having a conversation that is both, and oh, sorry, I meant to change that. That is both, asking for what you want, but also giving them the opportunity to come up with suggestions for you. So I meant to change this. I thought I had, but there's some wonderful resources out there. I do a lot of teaching. Others do a lot of teaching, but there's also, we have their pollinator networks. The Native Plant Trust has great programs. Grow Native Mass always has a lot of things going on. And in terms of looking for professionals, these are also great resources. So if you go to Grow Native Mass, they have a list of landscapers. If you go to Ecological Landscape Alliance, the same thing. The same thing with the accredited organic land care program at NOFA, Connecticut. And I will send these links to people so that you folks will have them. But also, I imagine amongst yourselves, you are talking about who does what well, who have you used, are they able to treat your property organically or not, and so forth. So, oh, I did do it, see? So where to find people, I will, and also native plant groups are great. So, people, the word gets out and it becomes word of mouth a lot of times of where to find people to do this kind of work for you. So thank you. Like I said, I do have, and I have more than enough time to answer questions. One thing, and I apologize you don't have it right now, but what I did was I created an ecological landscape health audit checklist. Unfortunately, you can't see it. But what it does is it breaks it down for you in terms of areas that you can be paying attention to, how you can address them. And I don't mean just areas as in what parts of your property, but category. And questions that you can be asking your landscaper that will get that conversation started. But again, power in numbers, and the trends are starting to change. So that's the positive. So I'm available for questions. I didn't realize it would go that quickly. I apologize. But I'm
Thank
happy
you.
to answer anything.
Yeah, Marie, thank you so much for your presentation. And I will remind the audience once again that there is a Q&A widget at the bottom of the Zoom screen. That would be a great place to put your questions. Try not to put them in the chat, but in that Q&A widget as well. I happen to see one in the chat, so I'll lob that one your way. Catherine asks, is there any way to naturally treat compacted soil?
Yes. Basically putting so putting compost on it. You can also try to aerate it. And putting biochar also helps a lot. But there are also plants that do well in clay soil. I don't have them off the top of my head, but they have root systems and systems that are made to work to be able to work its way down into that soil structure and get what it needs. So that's a natural way of attending to it.
Great. Rachel asked, she said, I've been working on getting more buy-in to use arborist wood chips or leaf mold rather than basic commercial mulch to
Mhm.
get increased bioactivity, increased water retention. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I try really hard to use leaf mulch whenever I can. It's a product that you can purchase. It's delivered to your driveway steaming hot because all of those microorganisms are hard at work decomposing the leaves. It doesn't look like leaves. It looks like mulch, and it smells amazing. And what it does is it looks like mulch, as I said. It does a great job of acting as mulch, doing what mulch does. However, it does break down. So by the time the fall comes around, you won't have as much of it there, but you'll still have, a decent surface of it. But it that feeds the soil beautifully. When you're dealing with natural mulches are fine. It's an issue of not putting on the layers too thickly. So 1 or 2 inches, maybe 2 inches, it depends. But you certainly want to stay away from anything that's red or black. No trees exist with that color bark. And I would also stay away from big wood chips because what that does is it disallows the water from penetrating down into the soil. And it almost creates this barrier that plants can't access what they need when you use that. Unless you're trying to just cover weeds and you don't care what happens.
Staying on the topic of mulch for a moment. Um, e- Mulch soil as well can be delivered in bags. There's also the option of bulk deliveries. So when we're thinking
Mhm.
of not just helping the ecology and of our own landscapes, but um, our overall environment and waste reduction,
Yes.
do you have ways of encouraging landscapers to move toward bulk
Hmm.
deliveries rather than bringing in bags and bags?
So I don't know if people know that I've been working on the plastics issue for quite a while, the plastic pots issue. So
Hmm.
I'm very aware of plastic in the landscape. And I have friends actually, not, well, they're friends, but they're manufacturers who are in the process of creating materials that truly are biodegradable. Uh, but right now, we don't have that. What I would suggest, and you can usually get it cheaper this way too, if you get it as a bulk delivery, as opposed to getting it in bags. Unless it's something that it's a small project that you're doing on your own property, I really encourage, the bulk delivery, to save the plastic as well, but also it's cheaper.
And maybe we can follow up
Mhm.
to participants with some resources for bulk deliveries. I'll make a note of.
Sure. Yep. Happy to.
Let's see. Another question came in. Can a homeowner get soil tested? How do you go about doing that on your own?
Um, well, first of all, so one of the services that Trevor and I provide is soil testing. But if on your own, what you want to do is go to the UMass soil lab. So if you just type in UMass soil lab, it'll bring you up this document that you print out, fill out, and I hope it shows you how you're supposed to collect your soil. Um, if it doesn't, it's basically taking a random sample of areas of your property that you're going to be thinking about or working on. You want to go down about 6 inches and remove any twigs or rocks that are in there. get a good cup and a half worth in a baggie. And they send you the instructions for how to mail it to them and so forth. It's definitely worthwhile. And one thing I would suggest people ask for is ask for the organic matter quantity number for the test. That's a separate charge, but it's well worth it.
Great, thank you. A question came in from Laura. I'm just going to read this one out. Every time I bring up ecological ideas with landscapers, not with the client, but with the landscapers themselves, they get very defensive and they say, my clients are happy with everything we do. So how can you try to shift or change the direction of that conversation?
My reaction to that is people don't know what they don't know.
Hmm.
So a lot of people don't know that things can be done differently, and they also don't know where to start. And so in asking landscapers that a lot, many also don't know where to start. So again, it's important to suggest to people that they educate themselves about what it really means and what it looks like, quote unquote. But it's still it can be a touchy subject, and that's all the more reason why I suggest being collaborative with it and just say, I'm thinking of doing this. I would really like to try this out. Blah blah blah. Sort of, as they say, use the I statements. What I am looking for, and work with them, because I mean it's going to take a little bit, but again, if we keep asking, more and more, and already there are more landscapers doing this. I know there are.
On that topic of dif difficult or challenging conversations,
Mhm.
not just landscapers, but occasionally we have to have some conversations with our neighbors. So, for example, if you've got a next door neighbor that still prefers that perfect manicured lawn
Mm-hmm.
look,
Mm-hmm.
um, do you have any useful tips for engaging in
Yeah.
conversation about what you're doing versus what they're
So
doing?
so basically, it depends how the conversation goes. If they're being accusatory, I mean, okay. Um, the way I respond to that is just go back with information. So say, I'm not looking to have, we can have a different aesthetic. Mine doesn't have to match yours. Mine, I prefer it has more plantings and so forth. I'm not looking for it to be messy. However, I am looking to provide, I'm looking to have a healthy landscape, a healthier landscape. And what I'm doing here is going to help you over there. And people may understand that may not understand that. But you're always going to have people that are just going to be hypercritical. But, basically, you try to keep things, again, if you put the right plant in the right place, and you know the height, you know how big it's going to get, you can have fine gardens that look very well kept. None of the properties I work on or I design for look messy. There are ways of doing that.
Another question came in from Janet. Can you talk about worms? Do you have ideas about how to avoid bringing jumping worms into your property? And what do you do if you start to see them in your lawn
Ah.
or
So if you
neighborhood?
if you start to see them, try to remove them. But my best advice is don't plant there this year. Just just they spread like crazy, and it oftentimes comes in from other plant material that you purchase, that you bring into your property. So we don't have a natural predator yet, for them. But it's sort of like when you have the flu, there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to sort of wait it out. And unfortunately, that holds true for these guys. It's hard.
What are they doing to the soil that's so bad or to the plants?
Well, they devastate the roots of plants. So, and also, they impact the soil, chemically and not the most positive ways. So it's like an invasive plant. They spread like fat. They spread like crazy. they're not doing anything good, and they can really disrupt an entire ecosystem. So, oh, another thing for that person to say to their neighbor is there's no native plant that is invasive.
Hmm.
They can be aggressive, but there's not a native plant that is invasive at all. But anyway, yes, just that's where we're at with that, with the
Um,
hormones.
on that topic of invasive plants,
Mhm.
some folks who are shifting to a more ecological approach to managing invasive plants may struggle, or their landscapers may struggle with coming up with a plan that does not
Mhm.
rely on, heavy herbicides to deal with invasive plants. So is
Yep.
there an approach that you take? It's probably going to be I guess, a multi-season approach really for a lot of these.
Well, it depends on the plant. So some invasive plants are harder to get rid of than others. My answer comes down to starvation. So the more, same thing with the grass, the less photosynthesis it gets, the less rigorous it's going to be. So basically trying to keep it cut back. If you see it popping back up, trying to keep it down. Um, I've been known, it depends on, again, it's very specific to the plant itself. If you're talking about, kudzu versus bittersweet or something like that, two different animals. But it also comes down to when the plant is uptaking hormones, right? Or the hormones going down. So one time, and this is just generally speaking, to treat an invasive plant is in the fall because the hormones are starting, to go down into the root system. So if you were to take something and just brush it with something, so I'm not suggesting anybody spray anything, but if you have one really, really, really tough plant, you can just, paint the tip of it. And basically what's happening is it's going to in time work its way down into the root system and kill it. But I try, it also depends on, sometimes in order to have biodiversity, you need to take a non-organic approach. I do try my best to stay away from that, but sometimes you're dealing with nightmares, and there are EPA, regulated material that you can use. And if it's that case, if it's that large rather, and that difficult, you need to hire somebody. You need to hire a professional to come in because they need a license.
Mhm.
So when in doubt, have somebody stop by.
Another member of the audience is asking about tips or best approach if they would like to chop up their leaves or mulch, or shred their leaves to use them as mulch in their garden beds, and it feels like it's labor intensive, either with a hand mower or
Sure.
whatnot. So do you have any pieces of equipment that you recommend or strategies for making this not so labor intensive?
Well, I mean, there are machines. People have purchased these things. They attach them to their lawnmowers, and so it mulches them for you. I've been known to literally just go over them with my lawnmower a number of times. And typically, if this isn't a bed that depends on where the bed is, but I try to get it to be about the size of a quarter, if possible, the leaves, and just spread them from there. But yeah, I mean, I try to leave as much as I can on my soil, on my gardens.
All right, I'm just taking a look at the Q&A. I wanted to revisit a little bit of the what you brought up earlier, is the waste reduction piece, the research you've done into plastic plant pots and how many of them end up in landfills. Um, is there a way to address that with your landscapers, to sort of politely ask, can you bring the plastic back or
Yeah,
find some kind of closed loop? Any
yes.
suggestions or tips there?
So there are two, Cavicchios in Sudbury for a fee, but they they take pots back, and they're involved with the system with East Jordan Plastics, where East Jordan will come down after they have a certain amount and take them back and recycle them. They're involved in that system as is Weston Nurseries in Hopkinton. So my landscaper, he takes them back up to Weston every time. That's where they go. And Weston's probably going to hate me for telling this, but but what I am doing is I'm trying to work with garden clubs, and I should have mentioned this to your group because I appreciated speaking there in the fall, about letters that I'm asking people to write that I want to share with MNLA and see if we can get more hubs, so that we have more opportunity to collect this stuff and have it dealt with.
And can you mention that entity, East Jordan?
So East Jordan Plastics is a manufacturer of containers, and they're based in Michigan. I went up there a few years ago to meet with them, and I saw the whole system where they do take the plastic containers and they put them through the machines and they come out into these little pellets. So they basically take recycled material to create their own containers. And what happens is, they have a system on the East Coast with some of with large growers or nurseries, not enough. And basically what they do is they come down and they collect certain pots, and in a large truck, they drop off their containers, they pick up the pots, and they go back to Michigan. So, and
It's
go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say it's always nice to hear somebody has actually seen with their own eyes
Oh God, yes.
that it
No,
actually is happening. The recycling process is getting done, because you often have those doubts, or at least I do.
no.
So I appreciate
They
that you've
have the
actually done
machinery
that.
to do it. They have the capability to do it. They'll never divulge what the machine is that they use. I couldn't go in with a camera. But yes, they actually do it.
And in the chat, Rachel noted that Native Plant Trust now takes pots back
Yes.
too, and she put a link in there if anyone wanted
So
to check
Van
that out.
Berkom also takes containers back. So, because they work with East Jordan as well. So Van Berkom
Right.
works directly with Native Plant Trust.
Okay, terrific. Uh, There are some comments in the Q&A, but
Mhm.
not any new questions. So some comments that popped up in the Q&A, just a little more on jumping worms and the ways in which they impact our environment. Another comment noting or suggesting better to leave the leaves than shred them, so we can preserve the insects and chrysalis that are trying to overwinter. So certainly that's relevant as well.
Of
If
course.
any other folks have questions they want to pop into the Q&A, and we still have a couple minutes left.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'll lob one in your direction, Marie, which is
Sure.
um, so another plug for the Lexington Living Landscapes native plant sale. If somebody
Mhm.
is purchasing native plant plugs and asking their landscaper to install those in their landscape, would you give them any particular instructions that would differ from, say, something that you would get from a traditional, a more like a big box nursery?
So you're selling plugs? Is that what you said? I'm sorry.
Small
Yes.
plants, native
Yep.
plants. Do they require any different instructions than what you would get at a traditional nursery?
So basically what the different requirement is you dig a much smaller hole. So a lot of my landscapers, we have a huge meadow in Carlisle. We're using a drill with a certain, I can't recall what the end of it is called, but basically drill a hole into the ground and then you insert the plug. And they're about 6 inches deep or so with a good root system. So a landscaper should know not to put them down too deeply either. So,
Yep.
and it depends on the plug itself, but if it seems root bound, to just sort of, scarify the roots a little bit, wake them up. Not a lot.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit. But yeah, plugs are great. I use them all the time.
Are you noticing any more, I guess I'll call it vertically or horizontally integrated landscapers who employ an ecological designer so that they can work hand in hand? So you're not bringing one person in and then trying to relay what they've said.
So what has actually happened is they're ecological landscape designers that hire people to do the
Hmm.
maintenance. So that's happening more than the other way around. We do consult with companies. We do consult with landscape architects, for many reasons. But it's typically they would be smart too. They would be smart too, rather than
Right.
having to go out of house all the time.
One attendee has asked, have you ever created a handout for homeowners that they can share with their landscapers?
Yeah, so I created a handout that you're going to get within the next couple of days that prompt, issues on the property that you can talk to them about. So
Terrific.
you're
So we'll have
not
a
ahead
lot
of
of,
you.
yeah. So we'll have, it sounds like we'll have a lot of useful resources, and I'm jotting some notes down here for materials that we can send to attendees following today's program. And I'm not seeing any additional questions, so I think we can begin to bring our program tonight to a conclusion. And Helen, I think I will turn it back over to you at this point to bring our program to a close.
Thanks,
Um,
Andy.
Before I do that, yes, I'd like to express a lot of gratitude to you, Marie, for being our presenter this evening and offering us lots of great tips. And certainly today is a day that I think everyone is thinking about what the spring has to hold for us. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Marie, for a wonderful presentation, and thank you, Andy, for moderating the Q&A. We have recorded the program, as I mentioned, and we will be sending a recap with the list of resources that Marie shared with us today. Thank you all for
Thanks,
joining us.
everybody.
Thank you, Marie and Andy, again. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Good night.